Hello and welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed the top gold, silver, and crypto stories for the weekend at August 5th, 2018, New York Stock Exchange, Microsoft, and Starbucks in crypto project. New York Stock Exchange, Starbucks, and Microsoft are to launch a Bitcoin-based project called Backed. Also in the news, U.S.-Chinese trade war heats up. A drone assassination attempt on Venezuelan President Maduro. Senator Feinstein of California had a Chinese spy on her staff apparently for 20 years. Gold, silver, and cryptos slide again during the week. And Bank Galaxy Digital begins trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And the Smaulgld mugs continue to trade briskly, sending out a few a day actually. There's the Smaulgld Super Classic mug that you can buy from the Smaulgld site, or the Smaulgld Classic mug, also available on the site. We've also now have a, this just in, there is a Smaulgld cup being put to good use, I believe, in Wales by Anne Ref. He's now the owner of the most prestigious mug in economics. Let's have another look at that. There it is. Okay, let's take a look at some of the top news stories. Well, we also have some Smaulgld knockoff mugs. There's one from Australia. That is an imitation mug. All right, during the week we had a number. Remember, we do a live stream on Smaulgld every night on YouTube at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll just run through the topics we've covered. Gold is jewelry and everything else is just trinkets. You can catch these all both on BitChute and on YouTube. Watch India, Cryptos, the Economy, and Censorship. That was an interview with the Wealth Watchman. JP Morgan, American Silver Eagles, Canadian Silver Maple Leafs, and Ted Butler. I corrected the record on some of the things I was speaking about with regards to Ted's theory on how the JP Morgan may have purchased Canadian Silver Maple Leafs and American Gold Eagles. What's up with America's Indo-Pacific economic vision? What drives the gold price? American Gold Eagles sales surge in July. Kazakhstan gold reserves jump again in June. They are now approaching those of Saudi Arabia. Gold supply outpaced gold demand in the second quarter. We talked about the World Gold Council report. Economic solutions that make things worse, and why the minimum wage laws are worse than you think. And deflation in the digital dark age, an interview with Anne Ref. Let's take a look at the gold price. Gold closed $12.13, down from $12.23, down $10. Silver closed about 10 cents lower, 11 cents lower as well. That drove the gold silver ratio a little under 79 to 1 at 78.89, but you can see it's been hovering well above 75 to 1 for quite some time. Gold is the metal of pipes, steel is the metal of bridges, lead is the metal of bullets, nickel is the metal of faucets, and gold is the metal of pumpers. And silver is the metal of pumpers. I love gold and silver. I just really, these pumper stories get to me. They're based on half-truths, cherry-picked data, and so on. Like the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable. There it is, 5 years, straight up unsustainable. All right, let's see what else we got. Oh, we have the Game Changer Smaulgld Eraser. Every night we give away a Smaulgld Game Changer Eraser if you can answer a question picked from Smaulgld blog posts. They could be recent, they could be from the last 5 years of archives. Shadow banning. Now, shadow banning's big now. It's pretty obvious what happens on Twitter, on Facebook. They serve up content that they want you to see. One of the things I noticed, when you look at Donald Trump's tweets and you scroll below, every last tweet is against him, and really on the same theme, just calling him names, Putin's puppet, those kind of things. But then most of the tweets, if you look at the accounts, all of those accounts are full of very similar tweets. They just seem to be robotic tweets that just post negative stuff, same type of memes, pictures of Putin dragging Trump around in a baby carriage, stuff like that. But of course, this is all about the conversational health, says Jack Dorsey. So showing us what they want you to see is conversational health. Now here's Facebook. Facebook to aid China's censorship goals. Well, there's a marriage made in heaven right there. All right, don't do evil, says Google for a few years, but now they're also going to return to China, and they're going to build a censored search engine. So they've gotten a lot of practice here in the United States, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube and Google, and I guess they're taking that learning to China, or maybe they've taken the learning from China to the United States, not sure. This one I love, Washington Post scoop. U.S. spy agencies believe North Korea is working on new missiles. Now, where does the Washington Post get information on U.S. spy agencies? Very interesting how this information somehow leaks to favored news outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN. Oh, and John Brennan works at CNN. Former CIA director. It looks like Podesta's under investigation there. Let's see. DACA now. DACA was a very interesting thing. DACA was an executive order by the president. You would think that, by President Obama, you would think that another president could rescind it. Well, a judge in D.C. Circuit says he can't. So that'll probably go to the Supreme Court. Who knows? Now, cherry picking in the wrong orchard. This is what I'm talking about. This type of cherry picking of data and insisting that certain things are true because of certain data. And I say banging on about the U.S. debt. We all know the United States has debt. We all know that what the United States does with its fiscal and monetary policies is reckless. And this isn't a whataboutism because the other countries are worse. But the point that all the countries, all the major central banks borrow ridiculous amounts of money, print up money to buy their own bonds, to buy corporate bonds, which the United States Fed has never done, buying other than when they bought the mortgage-backed securities. Swiss National Bank buys U.S. equities. The size of the European QE is now larger than the $4 trillion that the U.S. did. Bank of Japan's been going on it for years. Bank of England finally got off zero interest rates. ECB is still at zero. Japan is at negative interest rates. China has borrowed like $40 trillion over the last 15 years. So yes, the United States, you can cherry pick that data and say it's unsustainable. But if you don't look at the bigger picture, meaning that all the central banks are basing their entire existence on buying and borrowing, not borrowing, but by buying each other's debt and considering when a country issues debt and you buy and own those bonds that you somehow have an asset. That's why the whole thing continues to carry on. And the linchpin of it is the dollar, but the dollar is actually the strength of the whole system in a perverse way. So when you hear end of dollar hegemony, dollar collapse, I think it's prudent to probably say end of the fiat system. And yes, the dollar's at the center of it, but the dollar's not the weakest link in the fiat system. And there it is. China to crush the dollar. Well, there you go. China's yuan is down about, however you look at it, this way it's down and this way it's up, but it's about 5% off and it's heading in the wrong direction. The Chinese yuan is weakening. Now, late on Friday, the Chinese central bank did intervene, but didn't do much good. We'll see how it opens later tonight in the United States. Well, not in the United States, but in the Forex markets overseas. But later tonight, we'll be able to see because the markets open earlier over there. A game changer. China plays the long game. Sun Tzu. Now, we discussed this earlier. We're not going to discuss it today, but the U.S. version of the Belt and Road was announced. Very small. We did a whole video on this, and you can go back and check that. There's Ron Paul, end of dollar hegemony in 2006. All right. There, China to crush the dollar, end of the dollar. Russia's de-dollarizing, dumping treasuries, buying gold, game over. The Russian ruble's in bad shape too. But you don't hear that. You hear the cherry-pick data that somehow because they have gold, that makes everything better. Here, the BRICS have had an end-of-dollar hegemony. South Africa is going to amend its constitution to allow land expropriation. It's interesting how if the ownership of gold makes people who say that they are, quote, patriots and so on, cheer on China and South Africa and Russia and these countries that really are antithetical to many of, you would think, U.S. patriotic principles. China plays the long game. China to crush the dollar. China to stand for delivery. Make it default. China to roll out its gold into a stadium. All these types of stories, they're all aimed at ending dollar hegemony, as if you want to cheer that on. And also as if there's another country or currency out there that's remotely even better in terms of not having massive debt, not having central bank intervention. It's all that way. China lets the yuan slide into fifth month. No floor in sight. Well, that was earlier in the week. They did intervene. There they are, crushing the dollar. Remember launch of the petro yuan. That was going to be a game changer. We don't hear that pump story anymore. That pump story was pumped for about 2 months. It was really going to change the game. Gold back yuan. No. Gold exchangeable on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Gold triangle. Going to create massive gold demand. Game changer for gold. Gold's down 150 bucks since then. All right. And again, I like gold. I just think these stories do a massive disservice. Anyone looking to buy gold, all the top stories are all these pump stories. So if you're just a rational person, you look at it and you say, what are they talking about? And if you even follow them for a few months, you realize it's just one pump story after the next. And it does give the concept of investing in gold a bad name, I think, because the commercials, oh yeah, silver is the most undervalued asset on the planet. They've been saying that for 10 years. So if you've been listening to this stuff for 10 years, you might think they don't know how to invest if they say that. Now, you can go on about manipulation or other reasons, but to insist the same narrative for 10 years, the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable, the natural ratio is 16-1, any quick research will show you the gold-silver ratio hasn't been anywhere near 16-1 for over 100 years, other than for a few minutes in 1980. And when the gold, when it was illegal for the United States citizens to buy gold. But for the most part, the gold-silver ratio realistically is never going to be close to 16-1. Oh no, you'll see they're coming up with more reasons to use silver every day. Yeah, and they're coming up, as you know, with more reasons to use mugs every day. That doesn't mean much. You have to know how much silver is needed and what impact that has on supply and demand. They don't give you those numbers. They just tell you more and more every day. Most valuable asset on the planet. All right, let's see what else we got here. There's the other one. End of the petrodollar. End of the petrodollar. I've been hearing that for 15 years. Well, first of all, listen to this article. Saudis pump more oil to please Trump than doubt if it's needed. But remember, not only is Saudi Arabia still pricing its oil in dollars and accepting only dollars. That's not the main reason why countries still hold the dollars as reserve assets. But if it is, it's not a problem because Saudi Arabia is still trading oil in dollars. But Saudi Arabia is no longer as important as it once was to the oil trade. The United States actually itself produces more oil than Saudi Arabia and soon will surpass it as a oil exporter, which would mean that the petrodollar would be backed by Saudi oil and U.S. oil. So it's not end of the petrodollar. But that end of petrodollar, reset, end of dollar hegemony, multipolar world, all these terms get thrown around as if they're inevitable. Gold-silver ratio, unsustainable, China to crush the dollar, gold back yuan, game changer. This was a bad week for all that stuff. I kept hearing it here. But what's going on now, China's being hit for a loop, and we did cover this in a couple of videos this week. China vows retaliation if Trump slaps 25% tariff on $200 billion of Chinese imports. The stuff they're going to retaliate on is stuff that they actually need, and they're just going to end up paying more for it, such as oil, natural gas, soybeans. So this is not good for either side, but given that China has an easier route, meaning that they're buying less from the U.S., they're exporting more to the U.S., they have more to lose, and the tariffs are lopsided at this moment. There's Lou Dobbs talking to Secretary Ross. Trump administration says they confirm plans to raise China's import tariffs to 25%. Now, China's telling the U.S., calm down, calm down. Yeah, you always tell somebody to calm down when you have something to lose. At least not always, but it's a sign that it would be in China's interest if the United States didn't go through with what they're going through with. The way you make the United States calm down is you offer a proposal. You don't just tell them to knock it off. But here you go, tit for tat. Sinopec, this is China's largest refiner. They're going to hold off buying U.S. crude oil. So they'll have to get their oil elsewhere. And guess where they're going to get it from? It sounds like they're not going to listen to the United States, and they're going to buy it from Iran. And China unveiled its own retaliatory tariff, $60 billion on the U.S., and that was natural gas, some light aircraft, small non-commercial aircraft. But now the U.S. is working on a trade deal with the EU. So, yeah, and here's what Steroid said. Their proposed tariffs were on soybean oil, soybeans, peanut oil, corn oil, olive oil, mutton, dried smoked salted beef, coffee, wheat, flour, spirits. So U.S. products. But here's something interesting. With Chinese productivity, Beijing is going to shut 1,000 manufacturing firms. Now, these types of firms, these are the big polluters, heavy industry, but that's somewhat how China built its economic engine. Now they're trying to move away from that, but probably at the worst possible time with these tariffs. But they're all